Hey guys, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show. I'm your host, Ryan Cartledge, and I'm really excited that you have decided to take time out of your busy schedules to come and hang out today. We're really grateful for you tuning in. And if you have been listening to the podcast for a while, we really appreciate this. Thank you so much. Hopefully you have subscribed so that you never miss an episode. But if not, or if you are new to the show, get yourself over to iTunes, Stitcher, animaltrainingacademy.com, or whatever it is you're listening to this podcast on, and hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss a single episode. We are bringing you today's episode on behalf of the Animal Training Academy, or ATA membership. If you like the conversations in these podcasts, then I want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people within the ATA membership area, which you can find out more about over on the ATA website. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web classes, plus a huge library of videos and projects to problem solve different training situations. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group, forums area, and WhatsApp chat groups. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour nerds. But we will get started on today's episode, where we will be talking to one Dr. Robert Hewings. Robert is the author of Scent and Scentability. He is Head of Learning and Development for the UK College of Scent Detection and a highly experienced canine trainer. Robert retired from the Metropolitan Police after 30 years exemplary service, 25 of which was as a police dog handler. The final 9 years as a full-time trainer with the Metropolitan Police Dog Training Establishment. He has enhanced this experience with a BSc, Canine Training and Behaviour, MA, Professional Practice Police Dog Training, and a Doctorate of Professional Practice, Canine Scent Detection. Rob has instructed all police canine search disciplines, including explosive search and narcotics, supporting us with an amazing academic journey that has without doubt enhanced his relationship with the dogs he trains. Combining his scent detection experience, Rob is currently training scent detection within the assistance dog community, where working in partnership with the PTSD charity Bravehound is researching and training dogs to recognise the scent of a nightmare and gently wake the sufferer. Finally, Rob truly understands the importance of a positive training schedule with the dogs he trains and the people he coaches. He wishes to share his love and experience of search training with you and your dog. Witnessing the enjoyment and enthusiasm and excitement the dogs get from being engaged in the natural process of nose work has been his guilty pleasure for the last 25 years. As Rob says, long may this continue. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Robert to the show today, who is patiently waiting by on the other side of the world. Robert, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much for that. I still can't get used to people calling me doctor. Rob is just fine. Rob is just how I see things. How lucky am I being able to do a doctorate in things you love anyway? So if you love colouring in, you can get a doctorate in colouring in, for all I mind. To get a doctorate in dog training, and particularly scent dog training, has been a dream come true, I'll be honest with you. So just Rob, I've had enough pleasure from studying, so Rob will do fine. Dr.
Rob, no, just joking. And yeah, looking forward to hopefully, we'll see where the conversation takes us. But
yeah.
Yesterday when we spoke, you spoke very passionately about your learning journey and doing your doctorate. So feel free to revisit what you and I talked about yesterday as we were planning this podcast. It inspired me, and I'm sure it will the listeners of the show as well. But let's dive into the first question today, Robert. Could you please take everyone listening back in time to where you first learned about positive reinforcement animal training, dog training, and share some stories from that time?
Absolutely. Let's go back then. Let me paint a picture in your mind, and I'm going to take you way back. I joined the police dog section in the early 1990s. So from there on in, I was being taught by people who had been in the dog section, well, joking apart, since the 1970s. So that's kind of how things are done in the police. You're taught by people who have been in the job longer than you have. And of course, if you've got more experience than somebody, obviously, in inverted commas, you know more than they do. However, things changed in the Metropolitan Police, things changed in London and in the British Police Force, and let's bring the clocks forward now to a memorable date in my mind, 1999, where things changed considerably. The e-collar in the British Police Service was banned in 1999 from use, on threat upon if you did use it, you'd lose your job. The pinch collar, the same. So we had to change, the instructors who were training me had to change their minds, had to change their tack and come to other ways. So they were using positive reinforcement. They were rewarding with a ball. They were rewarding with food. However, how did they actually get there? Now, we never talk about the journey, do we? We talk about the final time where the dog barks at the suspect and we throw that ball. But how did they get there to bark at the suspect, to maintain that distance? And I asked, and I'm going to keep on going forward, being taught to do things that I would never do now, to tie the dog back so he couldn't get close to the criminal. And then once the dog barked, throw the ball. Am I a true positive reinforcement dog trainer if I do that? Yes, I'm reinforcing that behaviour, but I am punishing that behaviour as well at the same time. So from about 1999, I became I came from the real dark side. And then I became a balance trainer. And I asked a question, and I'm going to go all the way forward now and take you forward, because I genuinely believed until 2006 that a dog had to know that there were consequences. Do that for me, dog, otherwise this will happen. However, I asked an interesting question on one of my training courses. I was training to become a full-time trainer. And I asked my instructor, why does a dog do that? And his simple answer was, that's why, son. Which is not an answer that anybody wants to hear. That's why, son, is not the answer. And I asked again, and he said to me, if you want to find out, I strongly suggest you go and find out. That was my road to Damascus moment. That particular moment made me go and find out. And as an ex-soldier and an ex-police officer, I think I made the bravest decision I've ever made in my life. I took on education. I took on a role in academia that I would never have met before. I went to university to do my BSc as a mature learner, and that's when I learned what true positive reinforcement was all about. And I came back and realised that to try and spread that knowledge in the police, and I'll talk to you about that bark incident where a dog has to find that person and bark at him and stay a safe distance away. We used to do that by tying the dog back, so the dog would pull into his lead. How easy would it be to positively reinforce, shape that behaviour, talk about the things I'd learned at university, throw the ball early so the dog spins and then catches the ball and then hesitate and the dog stops and then throw the ball and then hesitate again and the dog stops again and the dog barks and then throw the ball. So you can see where positive reinforcement for me was revolutionary. And I would say I first started using it after I'd gone to the dog school. So 15 years of dog training and then becoming a permanent dog trainer. My date for positive reinforcement, and you're going to hate me for this, folks, was about 2006, 2007. So that is my moment in time, 2006, 2007, where I used positive reinforcement to train police dogs. And my training of obedience changed, my training of, don't forget, when we banned the e-collar and the pinch collar, we didn't ban the check chain. So that typical pulling on the check chain with the police, that's stopping now, because the guys are now using, and the girls are using positive reinforcement. And one day, I hope that we can share more knowledge with them, because they're still a slightly entrenched community. So let's include more education with those guys. So to answer your question, Ryan, let's go all the way back. 2006, 2007 was my kind of moment.
Your road to Damascus, as you put it.
Yeah.
Well, what an answer to get. So you said, why does the dog do that? And literally the answer was, that's why, son.
Why.
And that's why, son. I mean, that sounds like a very British thing to say. Like, I don't even know what that means. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, say what? What?
It's a polite way of saying, I'm not going to tell you the answer because I don't know it myself.
Right. And is that kind of like a pride thing, is it? Like,
Yeah, very much so. If you think about the hierarchical bias within any uniformed service, where if you've been doing that job a long time, you obviously know a lot more than people who have just joined. However, I'd like to ask anybody this question. Do I have 10 years experience, or do I have only 2 years that I've repeated 5 times? It's just something to think about. Doing the same thing time and time and time again doesn't produce different answers. And that's what made me go on to university to find out, yes, there are different answers, and to make my toolbox bigger, to learn things. And that certainly changed my attitude to behaviour into what I am today, education.
yeah, and I can draw from similarities in my experience, where my lack of experience meant that someone with more experience, with more time in the field, came in and just punished the animals and took away all the choice and all the work that we'd been doing up until that point, even though I was using positive reinforcement. I'd only been in the job for so long. So I think it shares similarities is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
that was birds of prey. That was birds of prey and positive reinforcement and free lofting versus tethering and tying to tethers, basically. So you said there that your road to Damascus, you got told, that's why, son. And then so you went to find out what that meant. You said that was the bravest decision in your life.
You can, think about this. Think right the way back. I seem to just be telling you stories about what I did. 1980, I left school and I joined the military. It doesn't take a whole stack of brains to realise what academic qualifications I had from leaving school and joining the army. And then in 1986, I joined the police. Again, not a great deal of academia support, nothing at all. So not only did I decide to take on a world that I'd kind of almost turned my back on, and then to take it on and find myself having to produce academic reports, to write papers that had more words than my normal post-it note evidence that I would write. A yes or a no was plenty for me to write. And at that time, and don't forget, in the background, I'm dyslexic. So I struggled with that. I struggled with that learning environment. I struggled with reading, but with the help from my 3 most influential people in my dog training world, with help from those 3, I am where I am now. So where people talk to you about the cliche of education being life-changing, it absolutely is, and it did it for me. And I was asked recently, who are my 3 most influential dog trainers ever there were? Who are my 3 most influential dog trainers? And people would expect me to say Ken Ramirez, Karen Pryor, Jean Donaldson, whoever springs to mind. However, I turn round and say Marion Justice, Pauline Jackson and Linda Taylor, who were my 3 lecturers at that time. Introduced me, Ryan, to a funny plastic thing that made a clicking noise, Now, that was in 2006, so you can see how primitive I was before I started my journey.
And so that bravery, I mean, when you talk about this bravery, was it to the point that you nearly didn't go back?
Yeah, very much so. To go on to an academic journey. There we go. To take on an academic journey in your early 40s and decide it's the way forward for you, sitting alongside people who have got A levels and who have been to university or college before, where all I could do was write a statement about what I've seen, what I've done, and the stories of actual fact that I remember. At that time I was a trained witness. I was a police officer. So I wrote like a police officer. I spoke like a police officer, and I expected people to do what I said. And now I'm out of my comfort zone into a learning environment that is not being led. I'm from a uniform hierarchy. I've got nobody telling me what time to start college, what time to get up, what to wear, what to sort out. Remember, that's the environment I'm from. Even worse now, I've retired and I'm in the big wide world. Did you know it's blooming terrifying out here? I want to go back to my blue, safe police world, please.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I hadn't really thought about that kind of context before, but it makes sense. So how do you take that bravery that you had then into dog training now? Do you find that you kind of draw on that strength that guided you to go to university?
I do, because that fueled a toolbox. And if you've got the education, education and the fueling for your love of animal training, your love of dog training, it'll be predominantly dog training with me, but that love made me learn, and that passion made me learn. And bit by bit, slowly building up on that passion, I was learning more conceptual type training. I was learning things like capturing, shaping, lure and reward, 300 peck, touch training, clicker training, and all these things were helping me as I could see my toolbox of knowledge growing, rather than me copying people who had done things before me. So I could look deeper into a training problem and apply the concepts I'd learned at college, rather than look at a very shallow angle and just repeat what those people had done before me. And if you think about this, if my senior instructor or our senior teacher within whatever learning environment we're in tells us what he knows without recording it, without writing it down, then he is only human, and he can only give you 80% of his knowledge-ish. I'm only human, and I can only remember, without writing it down, 80% of the knowledge he gives me. And eventually, you'll see that I will become senior instructor, senior trainer. If I haven't recorded all that knowledge in a formal, explicit manner, then when it comes to me passing my knowledge off onto somebody else, it again drops by 80%. That had dropped by 80% from the guy that gave it to me. So the knowledge pool in that training establishment is dropping all the time, unless you can get people to leave the establishment, learn outside, and come back in. If you have an entrenched community that I will honestly say that I was from, then I only learned from the people above me. And until I went to university, then concepts, then learning theories, developed my dog training 20-fold, an overnight improvement. So I looked at things in my academic journey, standard BSc, learning all about the concepts of dog training. And then I applied those concepts. Some people joke around and they tease me and they say to me, the reason why you did your master's degree, Rob, is you could never find your way out of university. So I maybe I walked into the wrong room, I don't know. But I found myself doing my master's degree. And with my master's degree, I looked at adult learning theories and how to set up a really good adult training environment, looking at things like Maslow's triangle and the basic human needs, going on to the safety and going on to feeling like you belong in your group and all those things, and eventually the self-actualization at the top. And this is a podcast, guys. I'm doing a podcast, you're listening to me, and I'm actually doing triangular shapes with my hands. However, once you reach the top of that triangle, you've got a great learning environment. Why couldn't I do that with the dogs? Why can't I apply Maslow's triangle to our dog training? Why can't I apply Malcolm Knowles' adult learning theories that I learned during my masters to my dog training? You know, people come to your learning environment wanting to know or showing you and sharing experience with you because they've got experience from times before. Why can't I use the dog's experience to help him? And so I looked at Malcolm Knowles' adragogy and twisted that around to yet another Welshman's phraseology that I find myself making up, and I find myself dealing with dogragogy. What kind of word is that? However, that's where we go, and that build-up of education affects something I'm looking at right now. So I've gone from my master's degree, and now as we go along in this timeline that we're looking at, I'm now in my doctorate, where things got a little bit deeper. And what I've been looking at for a while, folks, is how attitudes and behaviors affect your training. And this is something that has fascinated me for a while. So BSc, standard conceptual learning. Master's degree, adult learning. Doctorate, I've gone back to looking at dogs and scent work. And one of the things that I've highlighted in my doctorate is something that I'll paint a picture to you. I'll show it to you in your mind. I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine and look at a kind of I know it sounds a bit aggressive. I want you to look at a cycle of conflict. Batari's box. Now, something I did learn as a police officer about attitudes and behaviours, but I want you to think about this. I want you to think that my attitude, me, Rob, my attitude affects my behaviour. Now, if I was dealing with another person, my attitude affects my behavior, which affects your attitude, which affects your behavior. So if I've got a bad attitude, before I even speak to you, that affects my behavior. That makes your attitude change, and it changes your behavior, and so the cycle of conflict begins. Two people. How does that change? Because I've told you about Maslow's triangle being adapted to dog's triangle, if you like, and I've talked to you about Malcolm Knowles's adult learning theories being converted to canine learning theories. Not in the scientific sense, but if you ever were to look at Malcolm Knowles, and you can see where the canine will fit in with that. But now we're going to go take you to the cycle of conflict. So my attitude affects my behavior. I've looked at this a lot, and my behavior affects my dog's engagement with me, our partnership. So that's why I've crossed out attitude here. So my attitude affects my behavior, which affects my dog's engagement, our partnership, which affects the dog's behavior, which affects my attitude. And it's all well and good me talking to you about it being in a circle, but let's have a think about it. Let's go right the way back. And why I think that simple diagram affects how people learn and how we train our animals. And I'm going to steal something. Just pluck it out of the sky for now. Our ego state before we even start training. This is where our attitude is built up on. Our attitudes have been influenced by our prior learning. For me, my academic journey and things I have seen in the police and things I've seen particularly with police dog training and the events. So my ego state before I begin my training is influenced by my prior learning. Imagine if I didn't have the academic journey. It would just be based on events that I'd seen and stories I could tell you, and the depth of my ability that I'd learned from my senior colleagues, my knowledge that I'd learned from my senior colleagues, and my understanding. Quite narrow if you think about it. And if one of my senior colleagues told me the dog's got to know that there's consequences, then my attitude is slightly different. Because with education, we develop knowledge, we develop understanding, we develop ability to plan our training and the ability to care and the ability to realize that dogs are only human. They do make mistakes. So keep that in the back of your mind. Dogs are only human. They make mistakes. So my ego state before I begin is full of knowledge because I've got my academic background, is full of understanding because I've done lots of different training. I have the ability to plan my lessons and the ability to care for my dog. So my ego state is quite different. So let's go back and just deal with that person who hasn't been through an academic journey. And maybe their typical words and phrases, when their ego state opens, their typical words and phrases become things like, no, you must, you're bad, and that other phrase that people use, or the t-t-t. Already we are building an attitude of defeatism. We're building an attitude of failing, or we're building an attitude where we must win. However, remember I talked about depth of ability, knowledge, understanding and planning. So those kind of trainers have already got good, yes, the click noise, the thank you. So you can see that those typical words and phrases and those beliefs before you come in affect different things. And I would like you to think about this in two stages. That without the depth of ability, without the knowledge, without the understanding, you can go into your training and those attitudes, this never happens, this must happen, no, bad, can produce behaviors in you that your dog can read. It can produce a furrowed brow. We already frowned when we train, or I've written down a word, small mouth. You know when you grit your teeth when you're not the happiest man in the world and your mouth gets smaller, your tones get sharper, and your body movement gets harder, faster, and it's almost as if you're twitching rather than moving. And this is the kind of behavior where our utilitarian kind of absolutely working dog handlers, the tough guys, will do. Now, I'd like to fall the other side of the fence. And my attitudes are to understand, to realize that dogs are only human and they make mistakes, where we can be flexible in our training. We can change things because we've made a plan. We've got contingency plans. Because we're not stressed and we have plans, our body movements change. Our voice pitch changes. Our movement becomes more fluid. Our movement isn't sharp. If we have fluid movement, my attitude has made that fluid movement, which changes my behavior. Fluid movement. My voice intonation changes. My dog's engagement with me then is different. The tails start to wag. the happiness, the picture there, we can read their happiness in their eyes and how they look at us. They can do it to us. That changes our dog's behavior. The behavior is great. It's more friendly. It's more of a partnership deal. And then that affects my attitude, because I see my dog succeeding, I see his tail wagging, and I see that skippity-hoppity walk that they do while they're searching. And I begin to understand that that's the right thing. I've had nobody to tell me that's the right thing, but I begin to understand it's the right thing. I feel right. If we go back to our furrowed brow, our small mouth, our sharp tones, our movement becomes sharp. The dog's engagement with you changes. They step away from you. They may not work as hard as they would want to work because they're always cautious about what mum or dad is going to do next. So their behavior has changed. Their search behavior has changed. Their obedience behavior has changed. And you can see how that cycle of conflict took me a long time to write it down. And why do I feel that's the way forward? And bearing in mind, my doctorate is a doctorate of professional practice, which allows me to talk about my autoethnographic journey, my research, and to look at my journey and to ask you to look at my journey through different kind of lenses, with the academic lens or the dog training lens or the police lens, and see how much it has changed. And the result of that journey made me realize how much utilitarian work in dog handling shall change. It will change. But it made me realize other things about knowledge and how I can share knowledge. How can I share? And when I've talked to you about a furrowed brow, a small mouth. Now, literally, what is a small mouth? But when I was describing it to you and actually pulling my facial features in, and it makes me talk quite differently, you can see what I'm trying to explain to you. And a lot of our dog handling knowledge, a lot of our movement becomes tacit knowledge, and that's something else that I would kind of like to talk to you about, and how we can develop our knowledge to learn things.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing all of that, Robert. It makes me think about my dog's current behaviour, as wifey is in the UK, and I've just moved house, or have been in the process of moving house for 2 weeks, and I can just think about my attitude and my stress levels and my movement, and how my animals are kind of predicting what I'm going to do next when I'm trying to shift 3 animals an hour between 2 different houses over the space of one day. And everything else that comes along with that. It's really interesting. So I'm going to try and, just before we go on to tacit knowledge, I'm going to try and just do a bit of a summary to the best of my ability, and you're going to tell me all of the things that I've missed, and repeat back to you what you've said. So talking about dogography.
Dogragogy.
Dogragogy. I don't even know how to spell that. So you're saying attitude, it's a cycle of conflict. So your attitude affects your behavior, which affects either your dog's behavior or the person that you're interacting's behavior, which affects their attitude, which affects their behavior. So there's a lot of ripples that are going on there. And then from gaining education, you get knowledge and understanding, and it gives you the ability to plan and care for your dog, which changes your attitudes. It changes the language you use. And in effect, that means, for example, and I'm huge on planning, and I'm huge on spending more time doing that really than training our dogs or our animals a lot of the time, if not most of the time. And that influences our attitude going into the session, makes us more fluid. Dogs pick up on that behavior, and their attitude's different, and we have a better, the word you used was partnership. Now, my non-doctorate brain and the 20-minute, I will remember 80% of what you just said. No, hang on, let's go back. You shared 80% of your knowledge, and I interpreted 80% of that knowledge, and so that's what you just heard in me trying to recap what you just said. How did I do? How did I go? Was that...
Nailed it.
Did I? Fantastic.
You nailed it. Now we have to write all that down.
Yes, but we've got it recorded, so we just have to get this podcast transcribed. Which makes me think I need to go get all the podcasts transcribed now. So for the people listening, what is the main takeaway thus far? Is it to invest time in education, or is it to just be more conscious of your attitudes? What is the one thing more than anything you want people to take away at this point?
The education will improve your attitude. it gives you a better depth. It gives you a better knowledge, doesn't it? A better depth of ability than if something goes wrong. Let me give you an example. I met somebody a while back who was a very, very experienced dog trainer, very experienced. 20 years plus experience dog training. And when I was introduced to this person, that person said to me, "You're the clicker training guy, aren't you?" And think about this with education. "You're the clicker training guy, aren't you?" Well, let me tell you, I never use a clicker and I always use a tennis ball. And if any dog wants to be a search dog, they have to love a tennis ball, otherwise they will fail. And that sums up an attitude right there. So if that person was educated that there's more to life than a tennis ball, it might be as simple as a Kong, or using a marker word, or using a clicker and a high motivating treat, play, tug games. There's so much more than just dropping a tennis ball in. So if education can be included, then it changes attitudes. And I think that little story sums things up. And includes a couple of bad words. Sounds strange, but we all have words that we don't get on so well with when we talk about training our dogs. And mine, 2 simple words, always and never. Now, somebody could say, "Well, Rob, you've always got to do the right thing and never do the wrong thing." But that doesn't bring about the what's the word I'm looking for? The descriptive. It doesn't bring out the descriptive I want. If somebody says, "I always do that and I never do this," then we could be starting to open a door of conflict, and the way we need to talk to each other and share ideas are blocked just by those 2 phrases. I always use a tennis ball. I'll never use a clicker. And all I wanted to do was say, well, you could use a clicker and a tennis ball, and a clicker and food, and click and fun, and click and enjoyment. It's just a marker. So that's the story I was trying to give you.
Yeah, and I'm, or let's put it this way, absolutes, as I call them, always, and nevers are aversive to me in communication as well. Yeah. And you said they open the doors for those cycles of conflict. So is what we're trying to do is keep those doors shut, or are we trying to close the doors of conflict and open the doors of...
Close the door of conflict, open the one of education, spill that into education, bring it in, talk about it, share your knowledge, share that knowledge. And if we can share knowledge, and if we could even better still share knowledge and experience, we'd be on to a winner. Sharing experience, very, very difficult. Let me give you we spoke about this yesterday, Ryan, when I mentioned to you about a trainer whilst I was on a drugs dog handlers course, teaching my spaniel, or I was being taught to teach my spaniel how to look for drugs. Whilst my spaniel, English Springer Spaniel, doing the absolute wall of death around a search environment, and as happy as you like, giving me that expression and that waggy tail to say, "Dad, I am having the greatest time I've ever had in my life. I'm looking for something. This is brilliant." And I was enjoying myself watching my dog work. I was standing there thinking, that dog looks like the happiest dog ever. Suddenly my instructor said to me, "Did you see that?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "You missed it." Now, was I set up to fail? I'll never know. But if I'd have been told before what I was looking for, then I may have seen it. So my instructor has, or had, years and years and years of tacit knowledge. Now, tacit knowledge is a knowledge that's difficult for us to share. It's very, very difficult for me to write lesson plans about how to describe to you how to ride a pedal cycle, where you have to hold the handlebars in the right place, you have to find your balance. And if I was going to write down on my piece of paper, find your balance, what does that mean? Find my balance. Where is it? Is it in the top drawer in the bedroom? Where is my balance? So tacit knowledge is based on experience and talking to people and sharing those experiences. And if we can take that tacit knowledge of dog handling, did you see that? And put it into more explicit, write it down, film it, record it, then we might be on a winner. So how can I convert tacit knowledge of search, watching a dog search, identifying his footfall? Is the tail high? Is the tail low? Does the tail come up higher when he's find something, when he gets into that scent cone? Or does the tail drop? Does his nose lift? Is it lifting because the scent is higher, or is his nose lifting because he's more interested? Does he work on his tippy toes? Does he wag his tail faster? I work spaniels, so they just wag their tail fast, period. That's all they do. But is his movement there? Is his movement going to demonstrate his enthusiasm to find that scent? Is his movement going to show us where he is? That spin, that head flick. That pull on the leash, if you're working him outside and you're keeping him on a leash for safety's sake, is it pulling not that way? Suddenly that turn, the leash tightens, the leash loosens. There's so many things. So how can we, as a learning establishment, the UK College of Scent Detection, convey that tacit knowledge to people who have just started their scent dog journey? And we've been lucky enough to we all have, tech. We've all got smartphones. We've all got mobile phones. We love filming our dogs. We love talking about our dogs. Come on, let's be honest. We all love talking about our dogs. So we encourage, on the first day, we set up a search environment with pots and pipes and climbing on things and loose floors and everything. Oh, obviously safe. Shelves to search. Things to move, things to investigate. Now, I've not taught the dogs search because that's generally an innate behaviour. So if I put food out in my search area, and I know that there may be some professional search dog trainers now dying 1,000 deaths because Rob uses food when he starts his search work, and no, it doesn't teach your dog to scavenge food, and it doesn't teach your dog the phrase that we use in the UK a lot, which is to grub. What it does do is it shows my students, because food is an innate behavior. Searching for food is an innate behavior. The seeking system is switched on. So everything that Panskep talks about with the dog seeking system, already on day one on a search course, that's switched on. I encourage my students to film this. Film it, watch it, play it back. Film it, watch it, play it back. Film it, watch it, play it back. Because upon the approach to that nice little tasty bit of chicken, their head's going to flick, isn't it? They might go on their tippy toes. Their tail might lift up. Their breathing might increase. They might spin. They might spin on a sixpence. They might turn into the taste of that food. Then they'll eat it. They get their reinforcer. But the build up to them finding that food has been filmed. We can watch it. We can store that tacit knowledge that I have built up over all these years. But now they've got that tacit knowledge of their dog searching filmed over 3 minutes. And they can watch it back. They can learn that footfall, the tail lift, the head flick. They can do all of that. And so there are other methods where we can convert tacit experience knowledge into explicit knowledge. Something I do is I encourage people to talk about their searching they've done. We're very, very lucky at our college. We've got access to 2 Boeing jumbo jets, 747 jumbo jets. It's a very, very novel experience for somebody who's never searched an airplane with a dog to get on board one of our airplanes and start searching it. So let's take that incident and create some scenarios around that incident and start to tell our students stories about what could have happened. Stories built up on things that I've done over the years. So we start using story within our training. And then we would encourage people to act on their experience. So if they use story and tell each other the stories, the little scenarios they've been involved in that I've set up on those aeroplanes, it could be anything from searching Air Force One with a mock-up of the president sitting there being searched, all the way through to some elaborate terrorist incident that I'll put together. Anything, all fun. We use stories. So when we use stories, we build experience in our people. So I'm building experience, and because a story can encompass a bigger picture. What would you do with your dog now? What's your dog doing right now? And when you found that scent, come out and pass that story onto the rest of your class and talk about it. Talk about the footfall of your dog, the head lift, the movement. Remember that movement to tell that story. And they have an effect on the teller. A story has an effect on the teller, because if the teller makes that story exciting, your job, your search has become exciting. If your search becomes exciting, your enthusiasm becomes exciting. Your voice and intonation changes. Your prosody changes. Your body movement can change. You can become more confident because you've relayed your story. And when you've become more confident, you become, again, more excited. And when you become more excited, it becomes infectious. And we think about telling stories so people can listen because we're audio. But what about our movement? How has the storytelling changed our movement and shaped our behavior? And if our behavior is correct and we're excited, our dogs are excited. And believe it or not, this has worked unbelievably well. I thought when I first started taking new students onto aeroplanes that it would just be novelty. But if we can now relay stories about the searching I've done in the aeroplanes, that was great. I had a little bit of a trouble going up the steps. And then once I got onto the plane, we turned left. and I'll ask, why did you turn left? Well, left is a shorter area to search. It's easier to search left. And then I can scoop my search line, come from left and turn around to the right to research the back of the plane. So walk all the way down the plane. I think people just turn left, and I'll be honest with you, because none of us get to go in first class very often, and it's nice to have a mooch around, particularly with your dog. However, that's the shorter area of the plane. So their search technique is absolutely spot on. We build that through, and we talk about all these stories. And as I said, they have an effect on the teller, and they have a role in shaping our social behaviour. So we talk to each other, it aids our learning, we engineer our attitudes, and we identify from this exciting storytelling procedure that we're involved in. And what that then does is it allows our students, our dog handlers, it allows you as a dog handler, and if you think about it, tell a story about your training, tell it to yourself, because what that does, it allows you to start reflective practice. And when you start reflective practice, you can analyze all the training you've done, whether it be, for me, teaching search dogs to search aeroplanes, or teaching flyball or agility, whatever it is. Reflect upon your day, and reflect upon your day in a kind of a great way. And it's something I've picked up in university. I would share this with you. Don't tell yourself what was wrong straight away. I know we all do. We're all humans. Think about what went well. So when you're driving away from your training day, when you're coming away from the aeroplane, I will ask you to tell me what went well and why. What was good? Tell me 2 good things about searching that aeroplane. Tell me 2 good things about your training, your last training 20 minutes you've had. A couple of good things. That's good, because everybody wants to tell you bad things. But remember, we need to work on attitude. Go right the way back to what I was talking about earlier on. So when we've got a confidence and that fun and that smile about the good things that we've done, then if you really want to address it, deal with your self-reflection in a manner of, tell me what would be even better if. So what went well and why, and even better if. What would make your training even better? Do you need to reduce criteria? Do you need to up criteria? Do you need to change your attitude? Do you need to change your fun? And there's stacks and stacks of things we can do with all of that. So all that changing tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge, the use of story in achieving a reflective practice, believe it or not, that is what my doctorate started off with. And that allowed me to look at different dog training and different scent work training, luckily enough, all over the world. And one of the highlights was a story that I picked up watching post-traumatic stress disorder people train their dogs. And I was in Menlo Park Hospital in America, watching dog training go on in a veterans hall. And I was drawn to, and I don't know why, I was drawn to a single bed with a blanket and a pillow on it. And I watched a veteran start to pretend he was entering a nightmare. And I realized that, and you will too realize this, but this is all from my doctorate. I realized that the gentleman wasn't asleep. He wasn't in his own bedroom. He wasn't on his bed. And so there were a lot of false cues going on with the dog. And that was the moment in time where I thought, what would be the related thing between everybody's nightmare? How do people sleep? I was lucky enough to be allowed to speak to their partners and their wives, and everybody experiences a nightmare differently. We only see it on TV. And I asked one of the veterans, what do you do when you're having a nightmare? And he looked me straight in the face and said, I don't know, mate, I'm asleep, which is probably one of the most sensible answers ever. So what is it that makes you have a nightmare? And this was a cul-de-sac off my doctorate, a cul-de-sac that I wanted to go and investigate and look around the cul-de-sac for answers, and then come back to answer the golden thread of my doctorate, which is the converting of tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge. But how can you turn your back on this single bit of information? What is it that every person suffering a nightmare experiences? And we found out that it was nervousness. We found out that it was sweating. So stress, cortisol, sweat. Does that smell? It must do. Does it smell of what at that particular moment? I'll be honest with you, I didn't really care what it smelt of, providing it smelt of something. And then we eventually trained dogs to respond to that scent and gently wake the person. It's working so successfully. I need now to sit down with a scientist and do a series of papers. I think an academic paper written by me, a dog trainer that's mumbled his way through things as all he's gone, with a scientist. I need to know these things. So education doesn't work on one thing. My thesis was all about the conversion of tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge to improve dog training, particularly in the scent world. But because I was hanging around in the scent world, then I've picked up on other things. I've picked up on how we can use scent, learned or picked up through body changing to become our antecedent to get the dog to do something. Does that work with daytime anxiety attacks? Is that a different scent for our PTSD sufferers who suffer from daytime anxiety scent? We're working on that with Bravehound, and we'll train the dog to do something else. Does it work with epilepsy? We know it does. Diabetes? We know it does. Gluten detection? We know it does. There's a lot of things out there that we know, but there are things out there that are more, and we don't know. So that's fascinating. That kept me going through my doctorate. Those little cul-de-sacs, my journey followed a straight road talking about the transference of knowledge and knowledge management, yet those little cheeky cul-de-sacs that flow off either side when we talked about the scent of nightmares, the scent of epilepsy, and the scent of diabetes, the scent of daytime anxiety attacks. So many things that we can deal with. And if we've got the right attitude, that we know that it may work, it may not work, then we will get a team building with our dogs rather than a must with our dogs. So that's my doctorate, and that's how I've used it within scent work. Just tell stories to people, because stories are wonderful. They get us excited, and they get our emotions kind of firing on all cylinders, and it really does put you into the right frame of mind, ready for some really good animal training.
So tacit knowledge is sharing experiences. So is storytelling part of tacit knowledge?
Storytelling, I think, is a great way of sharing knowledge, and storytelling is a great way of encouraging reflection. And if we can reflect upon those things that we have done, our learning becomes stronger. And to transfer the tacit knowledge into explicit, that's where we've been lucky enough to have smartphones and to film it so we can rewatch it and rewatch it and rewatch it. I take a considerable amount of notes. I'm still a little bit old-fashioned when it comes to filming. I take notes and stop and ask questions. And that's when I would encourage, if you can't film it, I would encourage you to start thinking about telling stories and swapping ideas in social learning. And it gives me an opportunity as well to stop with the class and drink tea and tell stories. That's what training is all about, really sitting around with your friends, drinking tea, eating biscuits and telling stories. And that's how we convert knowledge.
Love it. So then the video is the explicit knowledge, and the story we tell about the video is the tacit knowledge.
Yeah, all joined together. So the tacit knowledge is something we gain through experience and becoming part of the group. And somebody who's mastered that tacit knowledge and makes decisions in his search world may have been doing searching for 15, 16, 20, however many years. And he'll make a decision, and you'll say, well, why did you decide to move the dog from the left to the right? And they can look at you and honestly say, I don't know, it just felt the right thing to do. But if I can give somebody the right thing to do to start off with, they can build on that search capability. So when somebody does something with their dog and I say, well, why did you do that? And they say, I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing to do. And lots of people say, that guy's a natural dog trainer. Well, he's just experienced and he understands the movement of the animal and reflects the animal's movement with his own movement. So with a novice trainer, if they can film their dog and learn their dog's movement, rather than have to watch it search after search after search and then build up, and it may take years, may take 5, may take 10 years. If we can film it while searching for food and not necessarily searching for explosives or drugs, then we can get that base knowledge understood quicker. I hope I'm making myself understood here, because I'm going around in circles in a minute.
So the filming, have I got it right that the filming would be labelled explicit knowledge, and then stories? My understanding of tacit knowledge grew from what you just said then. So it's all of the collective experience that might not be able to be described, but allows the person to be effective.
Yes. So if I'm giving you a story about the search I've just done on that aeroplane, and I say things like my dog's footfall increased, and he looked like he was walking on his tippy toes. And how do you mean walking on his tippy toes? Well, his back arched and his tail got more excited, and he suddenly turned into the scent and found what he was looking for. So now those behaviors become explicit in your mind. So next time you're working your dog and your dog stands on tippy toes, you'll think, oh, Steve just told me about that, I remember. And the tail goes erect, or the head flicks. And I remember Paul was talking about something like that when he was telling the story of the terrorist sitting down the other end of the plane, or the person holding the bag. I remember, and that's how we can get that, rather than if the dog does it, I don't have to say as the instructor, did you see that? And he turns around and says, what? Oh, sorry, mate, you missed it. Just tell stories, because then you log behavioral patterns in your brain, and then when your dog actually does that behavior, he's got his nose in the scent cone and his head flicks, you recognize that head flick. You know where to move your body in order to move the dog towards the scent, so you'll move your body and adjust it rather than have the instructor to tell you where to move it. A complicated thing, try to make simple by storytelling.
So are you saying this to tell your story to build understanding for others, or to reflect for yourself, so that
both
you build your own knowledge?
Yeah, so both. So whilst you're telling your story, you're continuing with self-reflection, and whilst others are listening, they're hearing and painting a picture in their mind about the dog's moving, the way the head flicks into scent, the way that you can change your body movement. So giving all this information in small parts will just get logged in until the time where you work your dog and you see it and you don't miss it. That's where it all kind of develops from.
And so it's kind of like, maybe it's not, I'm going to throw this at you, but put it in your own words and then tell me if I'm right, wrong, or if I've gone down some other cul-de-sac. It's kind of like record keeping, because I'm from a zoo world, so we record keep significantly more than dog people, I would say. Record keeping is like storytelling. And you offered some tips there, which is in that reflective stage, in that storytelling, in that record keeping. We could, I'm sure, go on with a bunch of labels that we want to slap on what that looks like. You ask what went well, why, and what would make your training even better. Yep.
What went well and why, and even better if.
Better if. So, in just to finish up this part of the podcast, in order to help guide people, and share your I don't even know if I should say tacit knowledge or explicit knowledge. To share your knowledge, and you can tell me which one, about storytelling. What else can you offer people to help them effectively tell good stories, not only for themselves, but so that they can help others?
Observational skills. Watch your dog firstly, but think about a story. Think about the excitement and the descriptive patterns you need. If you have to, I'm an ex-police officer, so I would have to write statements of exactly how my dog moved on toward finding the missing person or finding the suspect, how his paws lifted up a fence panel, and then I walked across the fence panel. And just to embellish the story, how did I feel at the time? How do I feel at the time while I'm working the dog, and does that affect my dog? So we search gardens for a bad guy, let's say. So here we go. Already in my plot of stories, I'm putting a villain in there to make the story more exciting. So to make it more Disney-esque. Disney are great at telling stories, aren't they? Disney are just probably the best storytellers. But my dog is now searching gardens, and he's not doing anything. He's just mooching around, and suddenly his tail lifts up. And I remember my friend telling me a story about his dog's tail lifting up, so I know there could be something. He runs across to a fence and he lifts his paws up onto the fence. There's no other reason why he needed to go up to that fence other than there could be a bad guy behind that fence. My adrenaline starts flowing. Do I lift the dog up? Do I check over the fence first? If I need to check over the fence first, is that person waiting the other side of the fence, and could he hurt me? However, I know that if that person was the other side of the fence, my dog would start barking. So you can create a story from the beginning of the search to the end of the search and finding the person, telling that story over a tea and some biscuits to a new police officer that has just joined the dog section. Then he understands about dog movement, about how your body should move, and you should step away from a danger zone rather than go and support. How you talk to the suspect. So in your story, you would say, I drew the dog back. I told the guy no certain terms. Show me your hands, stand still, don't do anything. And that person then now knows that I'm telling the story to. How does my attitude affect the dog's behaviour at that time? Because I'm being controlling to the person, to the suspect, is that going to affect my dog? So all the stories that we encourage police officers to tell one another, the stories that I would encourage my students who have just done a search to tell one another, will almost complete their search in their mind, so they know what to expect. It's giving them, what's the word I'm looking for? It's giving them an experience that they can keep in their mind, so they know the answers before the questions develop.
I'm going to not ask more questions because of time. Sit down and have a cup of tea. Might have a beer here in New Zealand. But peppermint tea is my favorite. Anyway, this whole podcast could be, I think, summed up as little cul-de-sacs of we're going to talk about this, and then we went off and talked about that.
Yep, that's normal.
Let's at this point, just before we wrap up, the last question, Robert. We mentioned at the start you've just released your book.
Yep.
And so a natural next step for someone who might want to hear more of your stories and get benefits from all of your knowledge. I'm intentionally not using the word tacit or explicit because I'm still working on that understanding in my mind. Where can they go to find this book, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
It's called Scent and Scentability. Amazon, shove it in there, have a look, and it's a introduction to search work. That's the best way I would describe it. It does contain a few stories. I do tell you what I got up to with my German Shepherd or one of my search dogs, and it's a journey through starting your dog off on search work. I would recommend it to anybody because it starts with the benefits, the enrichment that you can have with your dog, pet dogs. It talks about the seeking system, so it's raining the seek, and we get outside and we can do things. And what do they say? If it's a rainy day and we do some scent work, the seeking system comes out to play and gets the dog out of the house and doing some stuff. So it's all about training your dog to find a target scent from the beginning all the way through to the very end, the whole lot. It will tell you how to make a scent studio up with all the little different bits of equipment you can buy, how to save some money making your own scent studio, and what to do, how to search, how to move around a search area. So from zero through to hero. And what it does do is it gives you lots of choices, lots of different methods of training scent work. It's not Rob's way. Rob's way is just a way, not the way. There's so many different people out there, so many excellent scent dog trainers out there. So I've stolen some ideas and I've thrown some things around, and hopefully it's written in the kind of way that if we were sitting in a pub and having a beer, that's how I'd communicate with you. It's a simple, straightforward book. I wish I could set it sort of as chatty as Alexander Horowitz's books. I like those, and that's hopefully what it is. It's a nice chatty book about scent training.
Now, has that been included in the marketing for your book? A nice chatty book about scent training? Robert on the front in his police uniform sipping a cup of tea. Hey, once again, thank you so much for sharing everything so far, Robert. Just before we do officially wrap up, we've got one last question for you. We started off going back to 1999 and earlier. In this part of the show, we'd like to have a look now into the future. Can you share with us Rob's way? You said before the book's not Rob's way, it's just a way. But let's hear Rob's vision. What do you really want to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years in the animal?
5 or 10 years. I love this question. It's a great question. My background is predominantly operational dog training, and what I would love to see, I would love to see operational dog handling become less utilitarian, where where working dog handlers from that kind of environment, police officers, security guard dog handlers, customs dog handlers, treat their dogs as tools. I'd love to break away from that. So let's go back to attitude that we talked about earlier on. So in the next 5 to 10 years, slowly filter more education into operational dog trainers training. And what I would love to do is, rather than it become so utilitarian, I would like to be kind of based on fairness and kind of empathetic appreciation with one another. So you become more of a team rather than that dog will work for me. Cross that out. In 5 to 10 years, I would see that team work together on an understanding as best mates, rather than somebody controlling a dog. Let the dog make his own decisions, and because they enjoy search so much, they'll do a better job. So 5 to 10 years, less utilitarian, more familyness, more fairness, more working together, more education, and a stack more love.
More education, more love. And you want to see teams working together as best mates. Hey, we're all about the love here in New Zealand at the moment, so we appreciate you injecting that into the podcast. Hey, I was about to say just before we officially wrap up, but I've already said that. So one last thing before we officially wrap up, the actual last thing, is can you just share for the people listening where they can go to get in contact with you, find out more, your website, social media, etc., etc.
We have a page, Facebook page, the UK College, UKCSD, UK College on Facebook, but we've also got a website, www.ukcsd.com, where you can find what we do, who we train. We've got a great team of trainers. I'm not the only one. There's a great team of trainers out there, all experienced and rare. This is rare. All our trainers have operational experience combined with academic knowledge as well. So we're a great lot. When we start talking to each other, you'll just have to really break up the conversations because they go on forever. We train operational search for explosives, drugs, everything else you'd expect in the operational environment. We also train pet dog training, because why should operational search dog handlers have all the fun? So pet dog training, we're in there with that. Pet dog training forms a massive part of our market. On top of that, we run, because it's just a love of mine and it's something other than search I do, I'm an assistance dog trainer as well. So we run little assistance dog courses, not many, a few, and we work in partnership with a post-traumatic stress disorder charity called Bravehound, and have a look at those as well. bravehound.co.uk, and you'll see all the great work they're doing. And without Bravehound, they're well, I won't go into details. Put it this way, life-changing, and the sentence I hear is, without my dog, I wouldn't be here now. So that'll give you an idea about Bravehound and what they do.
Wonderful, and we'll link to all of that in the podcast write-up. Someone break out the English breakfast if you're going to go and hang out with the UK Scent Detection College, because the conversations, I don't know if I got that right. English breakfast, is it? No.
Yeah.
It is. Fantastic. Hey, Robert, at the start of the episode, you said that some listeners of the show might hate you because you only got into clicker training in 2006. But I think what we've learned from the show over the many episodes is that although it's not great for the dogs, potentially in some situations when people were using force and aversive, it's really developed a great base of knowledge, experience, and skill set in trainers such as yourself. So I don't think anyone hates you. I think there's a lot of positives that have come out of that and have only made you more of a force for good in 2019. So Robert, from myself and from everyone listening, thank you so much for making time to come on the show today. We really appreciate it, and you.
Thanks, guys. I just like talking about my favourite subject, so I'll probably still be talking whilst you're all asleep now, and I'll go on and on and on.
But you didn't drink any tea while we were here. I do have a cup of tea. I wasn't paying enough attention. I was writing too many notes. I was trying to get this explicit knowledge down on my side. Everyone listening, we of course appreciate you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals and our human learners as well in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of the episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior nerds. There's something there for absolutely everyone. We're looking forward to having you join the tribe. That's it for this episode, though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.